Hi, I'm Dawn Ennis. Thank you for rising up. This episode, we're doing the entire episode talking about transgender student athletes, a big controversy here in Connecticut and across the nation. Back for this episode is Karleigh Webb. Karleigh is a trans lifeline operator. She is a contributor to Outsports.com, where I'm the managing editor, and a transgender athlete. Karleigh, welcome back to Rise Up.
It's good to be back, Dawn. It's always great to be on the boss's show.
Our first repeat guest. This entire issue affects you very personally. Would you tell us why?
Why? Mainly because I love sports. I've worked in sports journalism most of my working life. I've been a competitive athlete my entire life, and I love athletics. And also, I've done work in the past with kids in athletics, and to me, I think a disservice is being done to young people, both cisgender young people and transgender young people with this lawsuit.
Should we explain what that is? Because some people don't really know what the word cisgender is.
Basically, it means your brain and your body line up. It is the opposite of transgender.
Yeah, it means you match. It means, it's a Latin word that says the same. Cisgender is same, trans is opposite.
Opposite of.
Right. So cisgender is people who are not trans.
Exactly. And that's all it is. But unfortunately, some people are still mistakenly believing that's a bad thing to be, or it's a slur, when the fact of the matter is they're afraid the fact that now more experiences in our society are being normalized than they should be.
That word normal, I've heard that word in terms of opposition to cisgender, and people will say, well, I'm not cisgender, I'm just normal.
Are any of us truly normal? I mean, especially in this crazy mixed up business we're in.
I agree with that.
But overall, what really got me into this issue is just being in sports. I think sports is great. I think sports are wonderful for everyone. Fitness is wonderful for everyone, and especially for young people. I think sports, those playing fields can teach so many good lessons when they're affirmed in a positive manner. And I think especially when you're dealing with in a community that is dealing with such societal backlash, and that suicide rate, which is something like, I believe, 41% who have at least attempted, or who have tried it, attempted it, or contemplated it, all the positive outlets that we can provide can make a huge difference, and sports can be one of those, and it should be.
Well, let's tackle the suicide question since you brought it up now. First of all, the average population, that means everybody, the rate's more like 2%. And for the transgender rate to be 41% is not because transgender people are mentally ill, which, of course, is a stigma around that word. It's because there's lack of acceptance, because there's rejection. That's what drives people to suicide, or at least thinking about it.
But also, there's the systemic issues that you're dealing with being trans in this society. I mean, take a good look at our country. 28 states where transgender people have no rights, or virtually no rights. What you're seeing right now with all these bills, for example, there are bills in Arizona and Idaho being debated right now, which basically say if you want to be young and if you want to play sports and be young and trans, we have the right to check your pants. And I find, it's a form of assault.
A physical inspection.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly. It's a form, and the IOC can tell you from experience the way that turned out.
The International Olympic Committee.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Now, what is the law right now in terms of Connecticut and in terms of professional sports for collegiate and athletic sports for young people?
Well, first, let's begin with the history. 2011, Connecticut passed the extensions to the current human rights law in this state. And one of those stipulate that no Connecticut school child shall be denied equal access to educational opportunity. And high school sports is a part of that opportunity.
Athletics.
Athletics is a part of that opportunity. Now, in interpreting that, the CIAC basically went with is doing nothing more. The Connecticut Interscholastic Athletic Conference basically said, okay, we're going to follow the law, and the way we do it is, what a kid tells their school who they are, that's who they are, and they will compete as who they say they are, and we're going to believe it. End of discussion.
Some people argue, how can a child know they're transgender? My response to that has always been, well, how do you know you're transgender? How do you know you're cisgender? When do you decide to become straight? Nobody decides these things, you just know. It's like knowing if you're right-handed or left-handed. You just know.
Exactly. But you see, that's all part of what we just talked about a minute ago, that whole concept of normalcy. which is, when you look at it, is at one level it's a false concept, but at another level it's a very expansive concept. And that's where, really, that's where the fear is, Dawn.
Why is there fear? What do you mean fear?
Because now people that have always been considered the prototype of what we quote unquote should be now realize that they have to share the stage, and some people just don't want to do that. We've been here in our history before. We've been here in terms of gender. We've been here in terms of ability. We've been here in terms of race. It's just the same warmed over arguments given new clothes and sent out against a new target. This is really nothing new.
I do hesitate, though, in comparing the gender, especially transgender conflict, to the race conflict, because, you know, people were lynched, people were hunted, people were discriminated against to the point of being targeted and forced out of their homes. That hasn't happened in the transgender community, but the discrimination is institutional, such that people can't get a job, people can't get a housing, and very often when people transition, they lose a significant amount of their income. I'm a living example of that.
Yeah, but at the same time, I'll also say 29 transgender women, 28 of whom looked like me last year, would beg to differ with that.
Yeah.
That is a form of lynching. I have gone through that personally in the past with people who have threatened me for being who I am.
Because you're a trans woman of color.
Yes, I mean, so those things have happened, and whether it's done by a rope and strange fruit swinging from a tree, or done by systemic factors such as economic violence, lynching is lynching.
Gun violence.
We need to start calling it what it is.
Yeah, I understand. I would say that by and large, trans women of color are the most discriminated against in our society right now, because there is a stigma, of course, against first race and then against trans and also against being a woman.
Yes.
How do you explain this, though? People say, I'm not transphobic because I'm not afraid of trans people.
Well, in this context, that term transphobic means more aversion than anything else. You'd rather not want to deal with it. You'd rather just cast it aside and not want it in society. And that's the real, let's just get into the nuts and bolts of this lawsuit. That's what it's really after. A lot of people believe that this is just simply a matter of, because I hear this a lot, I'm not transphobic, I'm for trans rights, but I just don't think, for example, Andrea Yearwood and Terry Miller should be able to run against cisgender kids at a track meet.
Terry Miller is a senior in Bloomfield High School. Andrea Yearwood is in Cromwell, and she's also a senior. Right. Both of them have won a large number of races in their 4 years in high school, and they were named in a lawsuit by 3 cisgender, 1 African American and 2 white girls, who basically say that they are presenting an unfair playing field, that they are not able to compete because of these 2 young women. And they're calling them boys, and they're calling them biological males.
No, those 3 kids are not calling them boys or biological males. The sponsor of the lawsuit is. See,
Alliance Defending Freedom.
Yeah, the Alliance Defending Freedom is doing that. Because I don't, now one thing I will say, I am not going to castigate Chelsea Mitchell or Alana Smith or Selena Soul. They're kids. They are not the one. And in fact, Chelsea Mitchell was interviewed a couple weeks ago and basically referred to both girls in question as she and her. Did the pronouns right? This is the ADF doing that. So let's call it what it is.
I have to object only because I was at the news conference and they all used that word. And they all called them boys.
And
so
no,
maybe they've seen the light since then.
Well, here's my thing.
But I think they don't think of them as
And I don't
girls.
disagree with you because I saw the footage at the same news conference, and I will say this: I'm gonna chill on the kids, but I'm gonna look at what this is really about. And what it really about is groups like the ADF focus on the family, the Family Research Council,
anti-LGBT groups,
high-powered K Street, Washington D.C. Christian Dominionist lobbyists. They've been doing this for 40, 50 years now. What this is really about is about the erasure of LGBTQ people. It's about the erasure of a lot of women's rights, and it's about erasure of a lot of civil rights. This is what they would call a cheap mission kill, because they believe they can get a lot of people buying it, and a lot of people on the surface will buy in it because they're going to employ certain language like fairness,
biology,
and opportunity, and biology, when the fact is they are using those terms one way, but they're meaning something completely different. If we do nothing else today, we need to decode that.
Well, let's drill down.
All right.
The argument goes, well, they had male puberty. These two athletes, Terry Miller, Andrea Yearwood, grew up the benefits of a male physiology. And of course, in most cases, the average male is superior athletically to the average female. But Andrea and Terry don't always win. They often lose. Nobody makes headlines about that.
Well.
Second, I don't know for sure on Terry Miller, but I know that Andrea has begun hormone replacement therapy, and that does have an effect on the male body. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that and why it affects their performance and why this physical argument of they're superior doesn't hold water?
Well, first again digging into a little bit of history. 2003, the International Olympic Committee put out a dictum called the Stockholm Declaration, which basically set up the template for transgender competitors in the Olympic movement, and they set a limit in regards to biochemical limits in regards to testosterone versus estrogen and so on. In the time that you've had these regulations, you haven't had a single transgender competitor in the Olympics.
They haven't even qualified.
They haven't even qualified for it. No national team has ever had a trans person on it. You just had the first transgender Americans even qualify for an Olympic trials this past year, this year alone.
Right.
So the NCAA in 2011 put their regulations together. Since then, you've had a handful of athletes, and your first national champion was just this past year.
Right.
At the high school level, high schools are still trying. High schools, to me, in many ways, the high schools are now starting to get to that point where they're trying to get these regulations further in place.
But they don't have any medical regulations right now, do they?
Not as of yet. But what they're also trying to do is work with the stakeholders, because Connecticut has tried this. They've tried to get stakeholders together and say, let's start building some policy. But every time that you try and get those stakeholders together, they're the people like the ADF who come in, try and demand a seat at the table, and they're coming from a point of exclusion,
right,
where everybody else is coming in from inclusion. More needs to be done. Obviously, we need more regulations. We need more regulations. We need more study. But there's only one way you're going to get that. You got to let them. Hey, you have to let people compete and do the data from there.
The rule should be that people should be allowed to compete unless science or some other body says it's unfair, right?
Exactly.
Tell me about the answer to the question I'm looking for in terms of the effects of hormone replacement therapy.
Effects. Well, first off, so many people get it so wrong about HRT.
And puberty blockers too.
Yeah, and puberty blockers.
They're reversible, right?
Number one, puberty blockers are 100% reversible. Ask any endocrinologist. And I know this from experience because I've dealt with them, because I'm on them. Mm-hmm. And secondly, to a lot of people out there who think that estrogen is a performance-enhancing drug, trust me, it's not.
Just the opposite, right?
It is really opposite in so many ways.
Tell us how it's affected your performance.
I've gotten slower. It's a lot more. Workouts are more difficult. Recovery times extend. Like a recovery time from say a half marathon for me used to be maybe a day and a half, and now it's 3 or 4 days. And because of the obvious biochemical because of the obvious differences. Things are moving around and changing around. Sure. I'm losing muscle mass. I'm losing some muscle mass here. Yeah, sure. That's part of it. It's part of the deal.
Sure. Tell me about when you're running. Are you the fastest person in the contest? You must be beating all the women, right?
No. All my training partners pretty much run me into the ground. But to me, that's not the reason why I run necessarily. Nobody is transitioning to win some local 10K.
Could you imagine a man taking hormones, or even a teenage boy, just so he could win a trophy or an award, developing breasts, losing body hair, seeing their body shape change, and in many ways, not being able to have what appears in the mirror match what they feel inside.
Exactly.
I think that someone once told me that if you start on hormones and they don't make you feel better, you're not transgender. That's not your problem.
Yes.
Because for most people, when you're experiencing gender dysphoria, what hormones do is they correct that impression in your body balance in terms of the imbalance between what you see and what you feel.
Exactly. But again, a lot of people don't know that. And you can bet a lot of people, a lot of administrators probably don't know
Yeah.
that, and teachers don't know that. That's why, for me, the bigger thing about this argument is getting beyond this argument to how do we make things better. And the thing I want to see, what I want to see like school districts do is basically do what the NCAA did.
What's that?
To start with, when the NCAA put their rules together, they said, okay, let's get all the stakeholders together. Coaches, administrators, educators. We're going to get people who think about LGBTQ issues. People like Dr. Pat Griffin, who was at the University of Massachusetts Amherst at the time. Get those people in a room. They got all these people in the room. Plus, they got people who work with transgender people. They got people from WPATH in the room. They got a lot of different voices in the room. They got a lot of expertise. They got all the data together and said, let's build a policy.
WPATH is World Professional Association of Transgender Health Advocates.
Exactly.
Just to make sure people know.
Okay. No, I mean, honestly, I'm glad you know that because I get fuzzy on those letters at times. But the point is they got that level of expertise in the room and said, okay, we want to be inclusive in our policies. We also want to build the best athletic experience for every student athlete. We want to make sure everything's above the table and above board. How do we do this? Mm-hmm. So they got all these people together. I want to see school districts do the same thing. And here in Connecticut, we have an opportunity to lead the way. I say, why not do it? The expertise is here. People are here. Concerned people are here. Parents, coaches, administrators, medical people, mental health people. All of it's here in this state. The expertise is here, and Connecticut can lead the country. I say let's go for leadership, not hysteria.
Karleigh Webb, tell me how you answer the argument, well, people just decide someday to become trans and start racing as a girl. Is that really how it works? Now, you know I know the answer, but I want to hear your answer.
I hear that so many times. Like somebody wakes up and decides, "Oh, I want to win a race. So I'm going to do this." No,
Yeah.
You don't do this to win a race.
You don't decide to be a girl one day?
Yes, you don't just do this to do it. This is not something you do on a whim. This is a very serious set of personal decisions that you're making that will affect the rest of your life. The decisions, especially these young trans people are making and are being empowered to make. Because now we're having a society that's beginning to get it and realize that these kids they're not kidding you, they're not pulling your leg, it's not a
trend.
It's not a trend, it's not a phase, and for many people, it's life and death. And you don't just do life and death decisions on a whim, no one does.
Some people get thrown out of their homes because of this.
Unfortunately, a lot more kids are being thrown out of their homes than I'd like to see, and that's happening here in this state. It's happening across this country. You mentioned earlier I'm an operator for Trans Lifeline, and I can tell you definitively I've heard those. I've been on the other end of those calls from some scared teenager who's saying my parents just threw me out, and I'm out on the street. And you hear those things in your heart cries. And even with the steps we've taken in our society, and we've taken some steps forward, we still got an awfully long way to go. And any way that we can take those steps forward, we should. And this is an example towards that. And exclusion, especially in schools and in educational programs and in activities, are a big step towards that end.
Tell me what you tell those kids who call you. What do you say? What can you say?
The most you can really do on its face is validate feelings and just really listen. And once in a while, you may be able to get with someone and provide a resource and help them through it. But the biggest thing is being there and listening. And that's with so many of these young people. And just being there and letting them know that, someone's listening to you. And someone is saying, I care. And someone's saying, yes, I believe you. And I'm willing to walk that mile with you. Mm-hmm. But they need more than that just at the other end of the phone. Kids need that. A school should be a safe place.
Yeah.
A teacher should be a safe person. A counselor should be a safe person. And yes, me being loving sports the way I do, coaches should be on the front line of that.
As you know, I'm an adjunct professor at University of Hartford, and I was lecturing at a friend's class today, and there was a young trans woman in the class, and she approached me at the end of the class to just thank me for being authentic and being true. And what we talked about was, by being ourselves, we're actually sending a message to the wider community that you should be yourself no matter what it is. If you're a Mets fan, if you like broccoli, if you're just a huge fan of the color yellow, whatever it is that makes you happy, you should own that and come out and be able to say, this is who I am. And being trans is just another form of that. People have this stigma, I think, of not being able to get their mind around the idea of gender dysphoria and what does it mean. Do you remember my friend Hannah Simpson?
Yes, it did.
So Hannah has this thing she uses that I love that explains transgender identity to people. Can we switch to the other camera, please? So Hannah has this thing that she uses to explain to people who are not transgender what it means to be transgender. Are you righty or lefty?
Righty.
If you were to write your name with your left hand, how would that turn out?
Not great.
Imagine you lived your entire life writing your name, writing everything with your left hand. And then I came along one day, as Hannah says, and said, try it with your right hand. How does that work out for you? You would feel natural, right?
Yeah.
You would feel like this is how it always should be. That's what being transgender is like. We're just basically saying, use the right hand. Use the hand that's more natural to you. I'd love for you to explain for me, if you can, why there are even people in the trans community who don't agree with the whole trans inclusion idea. There's Renee Richards, one of the first transgender pioneers. There's Joanna Harper, who's a scientist, who argues there could be things like handicaps or other accommodations, maybe a separate league just for trans people.
Okay, first off, let's take care of the separate league thing first. Our country already went through that one. That whole separate but equal thing.
Jackie Robinson, I think.
Yeah, it didn't, even before then. The whole separate but equal thing, it didn't work for the situation then. It doesn't work with the situation now. It's never worked for any situation. Exclusion is always inferior to inclusion. And our courts have ruled that from the Supreme Court on down the line. So on the separate league, just no.
What about handicaps? What about having a system where a transgender athlete might have, certain handicaps like in bowling or golf or whatever?
I mean, well, you know what? But you see, here's the thing. These are not bad discussions to have. But the problem is when you have people who are so bent on exclusion at the microphone and clogging up the court system and clogging up the dialogue, and having people buy into the fact that they're clogging up the dialogue, we can't even begin to have these discussions. Now, as far as the views of Renee Richards or Joanne Harper, you'd have to ask them. But a lot of people kind of shy away from this discussion in a lot of ways because they just don't want the target. A lot of people say, I don't even want to touch it. I don't want to play sports because I just don't want the target on their back. That's a good amount of the community. I hear this a lot. I'd love to play, but I don't want that kind of target on my back.
Because it would mess with your mind. Think about it. When you're an athlete, focus is everything.
Yes.
You wrote in Outsports about your conversation with CeCe Telfer, the NCAA champion at track and
Yes.
field, the first transgender track and field champion of NCAA, and about how people would get inside her head chanting and booing and things like that.
Well, the biggest thing is just you get on you Google your name and then you see all the ugly things. When the president's son feels the need to talk about you in an interview in a negative fashion, I mean, that's going to play with your mind a great deal. And in the Outsports article I wrote, when I was just chronicling back how I got to know CeCe. Mm-hmm. And just all the things she went through. I mean, there were times she'd email me and just talk about just the frustration of having to see you Google search your name and you see boy, biological male, all these ugly things that they're saying about you. And
the online hate
there's
a lot of online hate.
But here's the thing, it's a
There's
testament
a lot
to
of
her strength that she was able to block it out and do what she did. People talk about pressure. When you're constantly being harangued like that, yet you go through and you push through and you win a national championship. That's performance. What she did last year at Division II Nationals was performance under pressure. And having people boo you, having even prominent people come at you. So in many ways, a testament to her and a testament to her school, testament to her coach and that athletic program at Franklin Pierce for sticking by their kid. And not doing it in the shadows, but doing it publicly.
How are you supporting Andrea and Terry?
Mainly by being a voice, by doing things like this in my writing, in my craft, and just out in the world. You talked about the importance of being out. One of my mentors coming up and figuring my own truth out was a woman named Janice Booth. Janice Booth is no longer with us, but she's here in spirit. A Connecticut activist and just an all-out voice for this community. She told me at the beginning, you have to be out in the world to let people know that you're in the world. And to me, that's the greatest activism. It isn't just a matter of marching, even though marches do help. It isn't just a matter of advocacy at the state capitol. The best activism is walking out the door every day and showing up at that job and showing up as a teacher as a school or in a kid, showing up at that school every day and being active in the student body and being a student. For many of us, walking out of that door is a revolutionary act.
That's great. That's a great way to end it. Karleigh Webb, you are online on Twitter, on Facebook, and on Outsports, and we'll put everything at riseupwithdawn.com so you can connect with Karleigh. Thank you so much for being
Thank you for
my
having me
repeat
here.
guest. And thank you for rising up. Check out riseupwithdawn.com for links to this episode and previous episodes. And check us out on the Transporter Room. My podcast with Karleigh Webb is every Wednesday on the Outsports Network. See you next time. Don't forget to rise up